Marcus Thompson looked like any other 19-year-old hospital orderly. Quiet, hard-working, always willing to help. The doctors barely noticed him as he wheeled patients down hallways and restocked supplies. They had no idea that beneath his humble hospital scrubs was a young man who had already saved more lives than most of them ever would. When a visiting 4-star general suddenly collapsed during a routine hospital tour and the senior doctors froze in panic, Marcus had 30 seconds to decide: stay invisible or reveal that the kid pushing wheelchairs was actually a combat-trained army medic who had earned 3 commendations for valor before his 20th birthday. What happened next would shock everyone in that hospital corridor. This story took us an entire day to research, write, and produce. If you want to see more inspiring stories like this one end with hope and recognition for hidden heroes, please support our channel by subscribing, liking this video, and sharing it with others who need to hear these messages. Your support helps us continue bringing you stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, and reminds us all that heroism often wears humble uniforms and serves quietly until the moment when courage demands to be seen. Thank you for watching, and remember, you never know what incredible story is hiding behind the person next to you. Welcome to Hidden Heroes. Before we dive into this incredible story of courage and hidden expertise, tell us in the comments where you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button to help us share more tales of unsung heroes. St. Catherine's Medical Center in downtown Chicago never slowed down. 24 hours a day, ambulances arrived, patients filled every bed, and medical staff moved with practiced urgency through corridors that echoed with a constant hum of life-saving activity. In the middle of this controlled chaos, Marcus Thompson pushed his wheelchair through the third-floor hallway. At 19, he was the youngest hospital orderly on staff, with close-cropped dark hair, careful brown eyes, and a quiet manner that made him nearly invisible to the busy medical staff around him. For 8 months, Marcus had worked the day shift, transporting patients between departments, delivering lab specimens, and restocking medical supplies. He never complained about the long hours or the heavy lifting. He simply did his job with the kind of quiet efficiency that busy hospitals desperately needed but rarely acknowledged. Dr. Patricia Reeves, the chief of internal medicine, appreciated Marcus's reliability, but she knew very little about him personally. In her mind, he was exactly what a teaching hospital needed: a dependable young man who showed up on time, followed instructions, and never caused problems. The other orderlies found Marcus pleasant but reserved. During breaks, while they talked about sports, girlfriends, or weekend plans, Marcus would sit quietly, eating his lunch and reading medical journals that he borrowed from the hospital library. When asked about his interest in the technical material, he would just shrug and say he found it fascinating. Dr. James Martinez, a third-year resident in emergency medicine, had started paying closer attention to Marcus over the past few weeks. There were small things that didn't quite add up. When Marcus transported trauma patients from the ER to surgery, he never seemed bothered by gruesome injuries that made other orderlies queasy. His hands remained steady, his breathing calm. More intriguingly, Dr. Martinez had noticed that Marcus seemed to anticipate medical needs before being asked. He would appear with exactly the right equipment just when it was needed, or position patients in ways that made procedures easier for the medical staff. But hospital hierarchy meant that residents didn't make small talk with orderlies, so Dr. Martinez kept his observations to himself, filing them away as curious but unimportant details. Marcus preferred it that way. Invisibility had become his protection, his way of serving without drawing attention to a past he wasn't ready to discuss. Every morning, he put on his navy blue orderly uniform, clipped his hospital ID to his chest, and became exactly what everyone expected: a hard-working teenager grateful for steady employment. Tuesday morning brought an unusual level of activity to St. Catherine's. General Patricia Hawkins, a 4-star general and the Army Surgeon General, was scheduled for a tour of the hospital's trauma unit as part of a research initiative on civilian emergency medical protocols. The hospital administration had spent weeks preparing for the visit. Department heads rehearsed presentations, nursing staff polished equipment until it gleamed, and everyone was instructed to maintain the highest professional standards throughout the general's tour. Marcus learned about the visit from the morning staff briefing, but it didn't particularly concern him. High-ranking visitors toured the hospital regularly, and orderlies were generally expected to stay out of the way and continue their normal duties. At 10:30 a.m., General Hawkins arrived with a small entourage that included 2 aides, a military photographer, and Dr. Robert Chen, the hospital's chief of staff. The general was an impressive figure. 53 years old, silver hair in a perfect regulation cut, dress uniform displaying ribbons that spoke of a distinguished military medical career. The tour began in the emergency department, where Dr. Reeves explained the hospital's trauma protocols and patient flow systems. General Hawkins asked technical questions that demonstrated her deep understanding of emergency medicine, impressing the civilian doctors with her knowledge. Marcus was restocking supply closets on the third floor when the tour group arrived in his section. He glanced up briefly as they passed, noting the general's confident bearing and the respectful attention she commanded from the hospital staff. For just a moment, their eyes met, and Marcus felt a familiar tightness in his chest, the automatic response of a soldier recognizing superior rank. He looked down quickly and continued his work, but something about that brief moment of eye contact stayed with him. There had been something in the general's expression, a sharpness that suggested she noticed more than most people realized. The tour continued down the hallway toward the cardiac unit, with Dr. Chen explaining the hospital's research partnerships and advanced treatment capabilities. Marcus finished restocking and was preparing to move to his next assignment when he heard a commotion behind him. Tea happened without warning. One moment, General Hawkins was listening to Dr. Chen's explanation of the hospital's cardiac surgery program. The next, she was stumbling, her face suddenly pale, one hand reaching out to steady herself against the wall. "General," Dr. Chen said, concern immediately replacing his professional presentation tone. "General." Hawkins tried to speak, but her words came out slurred. Her left arm was hanging limply at her side, and the right side of her face was beginning to droop. She took 2 more steps before her legs gave out completely. The hallway erupted into controlled panic. Dr. Reeves immediately knelt beside the general, checking her pulse and breathing. Dr. Martinez, who had been observing the tour from a distance, rushed forward with his emergency medical kit. "Possible stroke," Dr. Reeves announced, her voice calm but urgent. "We need to get her to the ER immediately." But as the medical staff began their assessment, Marcus could see what they were missing. From his position 20 feet away, he had watched the general's collapse from beginning to end, and his combat-trained eyes had caught details that the civilian doctors hadn't noticed. This wasn't a stroke. The general's symptoms were progressing too quickly, and the pattern was wrong. Her pupils were dilated, her breathing was becoming shallow, and there was a faint cherry-red coloring to her skin that the hallway lighting was masking. Marcus had seen these exact symptoms before, in a field hospital outside Kandahar, when a soldier had been exposed to carbon monoxide from a faulty generator. The symptoms could mimic a stroke, but the treatment was completely different. If the doctors proceeded with stroke protocols, they would waste precious time while the general's condition worsened. Marcus looked around the hallway, his mind racing. The hospital had been doing construction on the HVAC system for the past month. If there was a carbon monoxide leak in this section of the building, everyone in the area could be at risk. He had to make a decision. Stay invisible and let the doctors follow their protocols, or speak up and reveal knowledge that a 19-year-old orderly wasn't supposed to possess. The general's breathing became more labored. Marcus stepped forward. "Dr. Reeves," Marcus said quietly, approaching the group of medical professionals surrounding the general. The chief of internal medicine looked up, surprised. "Hospital orderlies didn't interrupt emergency medical situations." "Not now, Marcus," she said firmly. "We need to get the general to the ER." "Doctor, I think you should check for carbon monoxide poisoning." The hallway fell silent. Dr. Martinez stared at Marcus in disbelief. Dr. Chen's face showed confusion and irritation. "Marcus, step back," Dr. Reeves said sharply. "This is not appropriate." But Marcus had noticed something else. One of the general's aides was swaying slightly on his feet, and the military photographer was rubbing his temples as if fighting a headache. The symptoms were subtle, but they were there. "Doctor, look at her pupils," Marcus said, his voice taking on an authority that surprised everyone present. "Look at the cherry-red coloring in her fingernails." Her symptoms started with confusion and coordination problems, not the typical sudden onset of a stroke. Dr. Reeves paused, actually looking at the signs Marcus had pointed out. "Also," Marcus continued, "check the other members of her group. I think you'll find they're all showing early signs of CO exposure." Dr. Martinez looked at the general's aide, who was indeed looking pale and unsteady. The photographer was now leaning against the wall, clearly fighting dizziness. "How could you possibly know this?" Dr. Reeves asked. Marcus knelt beside the general, his hands automatically checking her pulse and breathing with the practiced efficiency of someone who had performed these assessments many times before. "Because I've seen carbon monoxide poisoning before," he said quietly. "And because I know that the HVAC construction work they've been doing on this floor could have created exactly the conditions for a leak." Dr. Chen was already pulling out his phone to call maintenance and building operations. "Marcus," Dr. Reeves said, her voice careful and controlled, "how do you know how to assess carbon monoxide poisoning?" For the first time in 8 months, Marcus looked directly at the senior medical staff surrounding him. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of experience that seemed impossible for someone his age. "Because 6 months ago, I was Specialist Marcus Thompson, 68W combat medic with the 82nd Airborne Division. I completed 2 deployments in Afghanistan, where I treated everything from combat injuries to environmental poisonings." The hallway fell completely silent. "I've been working here as an orderly because I needed to figure out my next step after leaving the army," Marcus continued. "But I never stopped being a medic." The next 30 minutes transformed Marcus from an invisible orderly into the leader of the general's medical emergency. Working with Dr. Reeves and Dr. Martinez, he coordinated the immediate response while building operations confirmed a significant carbon monoxide leak in the 3rd floor HVAC system. "We need 100% oxygen immediately," Marcus said, his military training taking over completely. "Dr. Martinez, can you get portable oxygen units for everyone who was in this hallway in the past hour?" The general was conscious but still disoriented as they moved her to the emergency department. Marcus walked beside the gurney, monitoring her vital signs and explaining the situation to the ER team. "Patient is a 53-year-old female, acute carbon monoxide exposure approximately 45 minutes ago," he reported with the crisp efficiency of a combat medic. Presenting symptoms included confusion, coordination problems, and altered mental status. "Vitals are stabilizing with high-flow oxygen therapy." Dr. Sarah Wilson, the ER attending, looked at Marcus with surprise. "Are you a resident? I don't recognize you." "Hospital orderly," Dr. Reeves said, still processing what had just happened. "But apparently also an army medic." The general's treatment proceeded smoothly. Blood tests confirmed significant carbon monoxide levels, and hyperbaric oxygen therapy was initiated. Her aide and the photographer were also treated for mild CO exposure and made full recoveries. 3 hours later, General Hawkins was alert, coherent, and asking to speak with the young man who had saved her life. Marcus was restocking supply closets, his normal afternoon duty, when Dr. Chen found him. "Marcus, General Hawkins would like to see you." Marcus followed Dr. Chen to the private room where the general was recovering. She was sitting up in bed, wearing a hospital gown but still carrying herself with military bearing. "Specialist Thompson," she said as he entered the room. Marcus instinctively came to attention. "Ma'am." "At ease, soldier." General Hawkins smiled. "I understand I owe you my life." "Just doing my job, ma'am." "No," the general said firmly. "What you did today went far beyond your job description. You showed excellent medical judgment under pressure, and you had the courage to speak up when you saw something wrong, even when it meant revealing information about yourself that you clearly preferred to keep private." Marcus remained quiet, unsure how to respond. "Dr. Chen has been telling me about your work here over the past 8 months, the general continued. "Apparently, you've been an exemplary employee, but you've been hiding some significant qualifications." "I wasn't hiding anything, ma'am. I just didn't think it was relevant to my job as an orderly." General Hawkins studied him carefully. "Specialist, why did you leave the army?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I needed time to figure things out, ma'am. Combat deployment changes you, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to continue in military medicine or transition to civilian healthcare. Taking a job as an orderly let me stay around medicine while I figured out my next step." "And have you figured it out?" Marcus thought about the morning's events, about the rush of adrenaline when his medical training kicked in, about the satisfaction of making a correct diagnosis that saved lives. "I think so, ma'am." The next day, Marcus arrived at work to find Dr. Reeves waiting for him in the administrative offices. "Marcus, we need to talk." She led him to a conference room where Dr. Chan and several other department heads were waiting. "First," Dr. Reeves said, "I want to apologize for not recognizing your medical background sooner. Your personnel file only showed your basic employment information." "That's because I didn't mention my military service when I applied," Marcus said. "I was looking for a simple job while I figured out my future." "Well," Dr. Chan said, "General Hawkins has made some phone calls on your behalf. Your military medical records are exemplary. 2 deployments, 3 commendations for medical excellence under fire, and training that's equivalent to an advanced EMT certification." Marcus nodded, wondering where this conversation was heading. "The hospital has a program," Dr. Reeves continued, "that provides scholarships and support for exceptional candidates who want to pursue medical school. It's designed for people with practical medical experience who show exceptional judgment and dedication." Marcus felt his heart rate increase. "We'd like to offer you a position as a medical technician while you complete your pre-med requirements," Dr. Chen added. "Full tuition support, flexible scheduling, and guaranteed acceptance to our medical school program if you maintain your grades." Marcus stared at them, hardly believing what he was hearing. "There's one condition," Dr. Reeves said with a smile. "You have to promise to stop hiding your qualifications. We need people with your skills and experience, not more people trying to be invisible. 6 months later, Marcus Thompson walked through the same hospital corridors, but everything had changed. Instead of a navy blue orderly uniform, he wore medical scrubs and carried a tablet loaded with patient information. Instead of pushing wheelchairs and restocking supplies, he was assisting with patient assessments and working directly with the medical staff. His official title was medical technician, but everyone in the hospital knew his story. The quiet orderly who had saved a general's life by recognizing carbon monoxide poisoning had become something of a legend. Dr. Martinez, now in his final year of residency, had become Marcus's mentor and study partner. "How are the pre-med classes going?" he asked as they reviewed patient charts together. "Better than I expected," Marcus said. "Military discipline helps with the studying, and having real medical experience makes the textbook material more meaningful." "Any regrets about giving up your invisibility?" Marcus smiled. "None at all. Turns out I was hiding from the wrong thing." Dr. Reeves appeared at their workstation. "Marcus, we have a trauma coming in. Multiple vehicle accident. 2 critical patients. Want to assist?" Marcus grabbed his emergency medical kit, a real one this time, not the basic supplies he'd carried as an orderly. "Ready, Dr. Reeves." As they hurried toward the emergency department, Marcus thought about the journey that had brought him here. A year ago, he had been an invisible teenager pushing wheelchairs, afraid to reveal his medical training. Now he was preparing for medical school, working directly with patients, and using his skills to save lives every day. 2 years later, Dr. Marcus Thompson, now officially Doctor, after completing an accelerated medical program, stood in the same hallway where he had once restocked supply closets as an orderly. Today, he was leading a group of new medical technicians on their orientation tour, sharing the lessons he'd learned about recognizing emergency situations and speaking up when something seemed wrong. "Remember," he told the group, "your background and experience matter, even if they seem unrelated to your current job. Don't be afraid to use your knowledge when lives are at stake." One of the new technicians, a young woman named Sarah who had mentioned her prior experience as a paramedic, raised her hand. "Dr. Thompson, what if people don't take you seriously because of your age or position?" Marcus smiled, thinking about a day when he'd been afraid to speak up because he was just an orderly. "Sarah, competence speaks louder than titles. If you see something that others are missing, if you have knowledge that could save a life, you have an obligation to share it. The worst thing that can happen is that you're wrong. The best thing is that you save someone's life." After the orientation, Marcus walked to his office in the emergency medicine department. On his desk was a framed photo, General Hawkins presenting him with a Civilian Service Award at his medical school graduation ceremony. But beside it was something even more meaningful, A simple thank you card from the construction worker whose carbon monoxide poisoning Marcus had diagnosed the previous month, recognizing the symptoms because of his experience with the general 2 years earlier. Dr. Marcus Thompson's story had become part of St. Catherine's Medical Center's training program. New employees were told about the orderly who saved a general's life, not to create pressure, but to encourage everyone to contribute their full potential. The hospital had also instituted a program to better identify and utilize the diverse backgrounds of their staff. They discovered a security guard who had been a Navy corpsman, a cafeteria worker with paramedic training, and a janitor who had been a field surgeon in his home country. Dr. Reeves, now the hospital's chief of staff, often used Marcus's story in presentations about recognizing talent and creating environments where people felt safe to contribute their full abilities. Excellence often hides in unexpected places, she would tell medical conferences. Sometimes your most valuable team member is the one who thinks their background isn't important enough to mention. But for Marcus, the greatest satisfaction came from the daily work, treating patients, teaching medical students, and using his combined military and civilian medical experience to solve complex problems. He never forgot the lesson learned that day in the hospital hallway. That service comes in many forms, that expertise should never be hidden when lives are at stake, and that sometimes the most important moment of your career happens when you're brave enough to step forward and reveal who you really are. On quiet nights in the emergency department, when Marcus had a moment between patients, he would sometimes think about all the people who served invisibly every day. The orderlies, technicians, support staff, and others whose backgrounds and experiences were often overlooked. He thought about soldiers transitioning to civilian careers, hiding their training and experience because they weren't sure how it would be received. He thought about immigrants with advanced degrees working entry-level jobs while they navigated new systems. He thought about everyone who had learned to make themselves small and invisible when they should have been celebrated for their unique contributions. Marcus's story became a reminder that talent appears in unexpected places, that experience comes in many forms, and that sometimes the person best qualified to save your life is the one you never noticed pushing a wheelchair down the hospital hallway. The young man who had once hidden his medical training behind an orderly's uniform had learned the most important lesson of his career, that true service means bringing your full self to whatever role you're asked to play, and that sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is simply admit that you're capable of more than anyone realizes. And in a world that often overlooks the quiet heroes working in plain sight, Marcus Thompson's story serves as a reminder to look more carefully, ask better questions, and create space for everyone to contribute their full potential. Because you never know when the person restocking supplies or pushing wheelchairs might be exactly the hero someone needs.